Hi everyone, and welcome to our first charter member roundtable discussion at TiE Bangalore. This is the first of a series of roundtables, and the first theme appropriately for India is education. And we have with us 4 experts on the education ecosystem in India. We have with us Rishikesha Krishnan, Dean of IIM Bangalore. Welcome aboard, Rishi.
Hi.
We also have with us Mukul Agrawal, co-founder and CEO of Etutorworld. Welcome aboard, Mukul.
Yeah, hi.
And also with us is Murlidhar S, founder of Lodestar. Hello Murli, welcome. Hi. Thanks for joining. And joining us later will also be Sunil P.P. Acharya, South Asia Lead of Education at AWS. So we've got quite a bit of ground to cover in the next hour and a half or so. My first question to each of you, one common question for everyone, then we go to specific questions, is what kinds of innovation do you see happening in the education space, and what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs to get into this space? Rishi?
I think the main innovations in education today are attempts to blend both in-person as well as remote kind of learning, and secondly to blend skills and more traditional sort of learning methods. I think what we are realizing increasingly is the formal education system did a very good job of focusing on conceptual learning and maybe some of the theories and things like that, but wasn't so good in practice. Whereas we have another ecosystem which has broadly focused on skills, very narrowly defined. But increasingly we realize that in the workplace you need people who combine both. So how do you bring both together, I think, is the big challenge, and that's where I think innovation is happening in education. People are looking at new ways of designing education programs which bring both conceptual learning and skilling together. And that's where technology is also playing a role, because I think clearly there are lots of things you can teach quite well online even in an asynchronous mode, and that's largely, for example, you want to learn statistics. You could probably learn statistics by signing up for a course on Coursera, but then when you want to figure out how do I start applying these statistical methods, how do I define a problem, how do I then maybe convert that problem into something I can solve using statistical methods, then you have to have a deeper understanding, and then you perhaps need more application situations. Some of that could happen in the classroom, some of it could happen through projects. So I think at the high level, I think the main innovations are really happening in how you create a really good blended learning experience.
Great. Thanks, Rishi, for getting us started on that. In your case, what are some trends you see? Where's the innovation happening?
Sure. Yeah. So Professor Rishi has covered a lot of good ground. So let me talk a little bit further, build upon that. So in the education space, there's a lot of scope for innovation, especially how to leverage technology for a personal touch and an intuitive, easy to use human interface. So emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, they can be effectively used in education to provide a personalized and a natural learning experience which can be customized to the learner's needs.
And how about
I think from my perspective, I'm seeing 2 areas of innovation. One is in the vernacular or semi-vernacular learning space. India has a huge population which lives in the Tier 2, Tier 3 world, and they think vernacular, right? So for them, a lot of the learning tools today, learning platforms today are largely English-led. So, but they are, for example, let's take an example of competitive coaching, right? So this new startup which became a unicorn this year, PhysicsWala, I think one of its primary thesis is vernacular and semi-vernacular learning. So how do you build programs for them? How do you build tools which will enable them to learn? That is one area which I think will just explode because the population is large and underserved. Okay, the other area I see real work happening, which will happen maybe in the next decade, is the whole area of career guidance. A lot of last decade has seen a lot of basic systems come into that place, but I think still the space has to see scale because students in the high school and even in college, figuring out their future careers is still a big unsolved problem. So technologies there, even models of how we'll implement this at scale. Okay, I think these are 2 areas which I see really a lot of innovation happening on. And I'll endorse what Professor Rishi said in terms of bringing real technology to drive the learning outcome in these educations, right? While the previous generation has put in infrastructure to drive in education, whether it's schools, etc., through ERP platforms and all that. But the real learning apps are coming in now. For example, the last 1.5 years, I'm seeing that many of these schools especially in high school and schools, are saying moving away from just the infrastructure, which is the ERP app or basic app, to a learning outcome, to a platform which will drive learning outcome. And hence, as Professor Rishi said, bringing the blended learning thing. So an interesting thing observing is schools are saying that, so where is the student mobile version of the learning app, right? While in school we teach something, but after school, can the student learn from the mobile app? Or continue the learning basically, do assignments, continue learning, fill gaps which it didn't pick up in school, which is a real blended way which Professor Rishi was talking about. I think that's really happening on the ground. Just started off, and I see a lot of work happening there.
Great, great, thanks. So most of our audience is aspiring entrepreneurs. So how would you suggest that they get into this space? How do they spot a problem? How should they get into this education space? Rishi?
Well, I think the basic process is pretty much the same. I would strongly recommend any entrepreneur, actually in any field, whether it be education or anywhere else, to get immersed into the problem. So go and spend time in the school or a college or wherever is the arena where you want to work. Try to speak to a lot of learners, speak to educators, try to understand where are the pain points. I think it doesn't happen through imagination in my view. You have to be actually out there on the ground. So in a book that Vinay and I wrote several years ago, we identified 3 important drivers of a good innovation. One is identify pain points, second is look for waves, and third, seek out waste. So pain, wave and waste. Wherever you find people are struggling or you're not delivering value, that's certainly the pain point. Look for trends. That's what the wave represents. The trend could be in terms of a consumer trend, social trend, technology trend, whatever it is. And finally, look for waste. Waste could be waste of anything. It could be waste of time, effort, energy, material. So, but you will really find these only if you go out there and immerse yourself in what people are doing. So that's my main recommendation to any entrepreneur who wants to enter the education space. Don't just go by some hunch that you have. Go out there and figure out what the real problems are.
So go beyond the hunch, validate, immerse. What would you add as tips to those?
Right. So let me just add a little bit further. So the education space is very vast. There are lots of different things that can be done. So first and foremost, it's very important for a budding entrepreneur to identify a niche. What is it that they want to do in this particular space? For example, are they looking at the school market, preschool? Some of them are going after preschool. Some of them are going after K-12. They're going into college education. Some of them are going into professional education. So get a niche. Second thing is that are you sort of doing things in school or in campus, or is it an after school? Or is it supplementary learning, or are you sort of doing it during the school? Then whom are you selling to? I mean, are you selling it to schools? Are they the buyers? Or are the parents or the students, are they your buyers? Who are they? So whom are you addressing who is your primary audience? So that kind of clarity is very critical to understand whom you are going after, what need are you serving, then what else is available in the market. I mean, there must be something happening there. So whatever problem you're trying to solve, there must be somebody else doing it in some manner. So try and figure out how that problem is getting solved today, and how are we going to do it differently, and what are the pain points, how are we going to do it differently. So those are some of the things that were very critical to get started. Then building upon that a little bit then we have then design the solution. Okay, I mean, that's okay, what is my solution which addresses these pain points, which addresses this niche in a very unique and effective manner. And finally, the entrepreneur must have an idea of the market size, because sometimes the problems are very, very small. So they are not really amenable for an entrepreneur, they are not really interesting to an entrepreneur. So make sure that there is sufficient market for what you are trying to do over there. And also then they should have a clear go-to-market strategy. I mean, are you going to be selling to schools? Are you going to be selling to parents? How are you going to get to the market? So that is very important. And finally, they should also have a price point, which is attractive to the student or the parents or the schools, whoever is going to buy it, and at the same time it makes financial sense. It doesn't kind of make sense to say, oh, we'll give it away free and later on worry about how to make money. It doesn't work that way. Today, that era is gone, where VCs will keep pumping money into the venture and with the hope that you build an audience and at some point you'll monetize it. So now things have to change a little bit. We have to be clear about the model, business model also upfront. Okay, how will we make money out of it in a manner that it is equitable for the customer as well as viable for the entrepreneur. So there are many different things that need to be do. And finally, they must have for anything to succeed, they have to have a sense of urgency and a burning desire and passion to succeed. I mean, without the desire, passion, and without that urgency, we really won't get any success.
What would you add to that? We have
I
immersion
want
to go to market. Yeah.
Other two speakers said, I would like to sort of emphasize and bring sharper focus to the idea that entrepreneurs should understand the real needs of the Indian customer. Why I'm saying that is because a lot of the education innovation that happens is, some of them are derived from models which are there abroad. So the customer behavior is very different. Okay, for example, the physics one example is a classic example, right? So similarly, so Indian customers, either it's institutions, Indian schools, or Indian colleges, or Indian parent and Indian student behave very differently. So I think entrepreneurs should focus on that and and not assume a need. When I meet entrepreneurs in the education segment, I see a lot of entrepreneurs have built companies out of their personal experience, which means I am a student, I face this problem, so I'm building this company, or I am a parent, my child is facing this problem and I'm building this company. What happens with that approach is that you are looking at a very isolated need of incident of the of the problem set, and that may not be true for the wider audience. So when you go with a solution like that to the school, rest of the parents just are not willing to buy that whole thesis, right? So build products with adequate research in the market. That would be one, and understanding the Indian consumers' need. Okay. The second thing is from the market side is, and this is strong advice I do to a lot of startups, is that figure out who's going to pay for it, right? And what price point. Partly the point that Mukul was saying about GTM and all that, right? I think a large number of Indian education EdTech startups fail because they've just not figured out that. They build great product. They say that, okay, the student is not learning science well, so I'll build a mobile laboratory or a digital laboratory kind of a thing, online. Fantastic. So you thought that that's a problem which you saw in your child or yourself. You built a problem. Now who's going to pay for it? Will the individual parent pay for it? Why will he pay? The individual parent is paying 50, 60, 100, 1,000 rupees to a school. Why would they pay additionally? Why will the school pay that? So nobody's figured that out. And these companies, there are dime a dozen such companies just laundering. So figure out that why will the customer pay? In fact, in some of my mentoring now, I'm saying that first figure out why they will pay, and then figure out the rest of the product. Because if you've not figured that out, your product is never going to succeed, right? Just saying that there's a mass of customers there who don't have quality education is a very superficial and a lazy way of articulating the problem. I think you need to figure out who will actually buy and why will they pay for it. If you figure that out, I think you can build a company in education.
Great. So assuming that they've got into the space, they've launched their product, they launched their company, how should they scale? The next question for you all would be, once you start the company and succeed beyond go to market, how do you scale up the company?
I think it depends on what segment of the market you're dealing with, Madan. I think firstly, if you are building a B2B company, then obviously you've got to build a B2B scale engine. If you're building a B2C or direct to consumer company, then that whole scaling is different. And here again, my strong advice would be for the founding team and for the startups to have sales, marketing, go-to-market specialists in the team very early on. A lot of education startups are really built by people with a lot of intense knowledge or immense knowledge about education, about the process of learning, and they're building solutions of that, but they're not adequately paid attention to the go-to-market, and hence the products never take off. They really don't take off. So I think building that, and so there are obviously a lot of existing ways to go to market. For example, today you can go to market in B2B on your own. You can build your own sales team and stuff like that. But there are also now intermediaries which take companies to go to market, which have built a whole platform which are aggregating products, and they're taking a set of products to the same institution. So there are channels like that which are available now. You utilize that. D2C, direct to customer, obviously is a huge marketing game. that would also require specialization in B2C, going to B2C, right? If you don't have that skill, then that will be very difficult to do.
Okay, great. Let the camera roll. I'm just going to explain what's happening. We're doing the first three common questions for everyone and then specific ones. So let me, I'll ask him his two questions and then we carry on with this round.
Sure.
So the first question was, what's the scope of innovation in the space of education? What are you looking at as in education? The second question for you would be, how do startups get into this space? He's mic'd up?
He's mic'd up.
He's mic'd up, yeah. Just a quick sound check.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Once more. Can you hear me? Hello. Yes. Mic 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, quick introductions. Have you met Rishi before? Rishi, Sunil? So, Sunil, AWS, Mukul.
I'm Mukul.
From Etutorworld, and Murlidhar from Lodestar. You guys know each other, yeah. So the first question would have been, where's the innovation happening in this space? Second one would be, how do startups get into the space? How do they spot a problem? And right now we're on the third one, which is how do they scale? Then I'll come to specific questions each of you. So begin with the first one. So I just tell the scope of innovation that you see in the space of education, and what are the opportunities for entrepreneurs?
See, what we are seeing right now is that the scale of globally, there is a lot of talk of EdTech and how EdTech is scaling, right? I think the USP that India has, because of the size of the market, the sheer size of the market, number of students that we have, I think the potential for us to do a lot on technology is very, very high. I don't think we really scratched the surface yet. For example, if you look at personalized learning, right? We've been talking about it for 30 odd years. I don't think we've reached even maybe 1% of what can be done there. And I think a lot of work is going in that area, but I think personalized learning is going to be a differentiator in the market. And globally, nobody has really mastered that to a level where we can talk about everyone having it. So, for example, AI, ML, we talk about AI and ML in a very, very, lot of language being spoken about it, but how many edtechs actually use AI and ML effectively? That's very limited today. A lot of people don't really have AI and ML in a productive environment. They're looking at it in sample code work that's happening in the back office. Nobody really looking at it. Data and having data analysis being done, right? There's a lot of data. Most of the edtechs today, at least in India, globally, have a lot of data. But how much of that is driving curriculum creation, content creation, basis that data? So I think personalized learning is going to be a big differentiator. And we're seeing a lot of people talking about it, both locally and internationally, but we're not seeing anyone actually practically rolling it out in a productive environment. We're not seeing that yet. I think that's a big opportunity. And I think that's going to become bigger because of the fact that the attention span of kids have dropped significantly. So if you don't have content that's very targeted to that learning requirement, you don't have the kind of cost customer anymore. So I think we're going to see that trend catching on. We're looking at actually building that in an effective manner. Existing edtechs and new edtechs coming up, look at that as an area of focus.
Yeah. So how should an entrepreneur get into this space? What are some tips you have for problem spotting, those kind of things?
I keep seeing most of the edtechs, when Mr. Murli was talking about it, is that segmenting your focus. See, I think the challenge that we have today, the market is such a lot of different markets to address, right? You have the coaching institution market, you have the test prep market, you have the K-12. In K-12, you have the secondary and primary school market, then you have higher education across engineering, non-engineering, then you have skilling market. So the layers of markets are quite a lot. It is in India, we have the complexity of these layers of market. So if you don't define your segment of focus very clearly, you will end up trying to solve everyone's problem, which is not going to be a very successful model to work in. And you'll have a lot of different heads in businesses. You'll feel very rich about the product, but you really won't land it in the market effectively. While the GTM strategy is critically important, which you don't see most people having a comprehensive go-to-market plan with regard to the products, right? They build great technologies, but customer acquisition is not very well thought through. And they look at the first two wins are kind of easy, replicating and scaling that is normally very, very difficult, at least in India. And if you're looking at the K-12 market, the challenges are very different compared to higher education. If you're looking at B2C, that's a nightmare of its own, right? It's a heavy spend. Customer acquisition costs are very, very expensive. So how do you build that? Then you have a lot of people looking at tier 2 and tier 3 cities as a focus, which is a great market to go with. Then you have language complication there. How do you address multilingual requirements in this market for content? How do you play that game? And multilingual content is not very easy. And technology cannot solve all of it, right? You need to have great teachers ultimately, because ultimately the kids' interface is going to start there. And people looking at this hybrid model, not really tech and teacher, looking at a tech that's going to be delivering content, and a teacher locally trying to teach the child in the classroom. That model is kind of shaping up. I'm seeing a lot of the edtechs bringing that model in, because earlier hybrid was you had online learning at home and you had offline in the classroom.
Yeah.
They say, can you do online, offline in the classroom, where the teacher is trained to basically use rich content to deliver an effective class. And we're seeing that becoming a little bit of a good hook, and people are seeing a lot of interest there to see how we can scale. It's expensive, but it's scalable.
Great. Now we'll go back to the other question,
Okay.
which was how to scale up. So I'll do him, then you, then you, and then to the next question. Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's editing. No, it's not a sequential thing. Jump in. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When you add on, we need to pick up, so there'll be a gap. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. No, you can just say, I'd like to say something. So that's the cue, and then the editor will follow up on that. Yeah.
Between the camera. Ask a question of how can entrepreneurs
Scale. Yeah.
I'll get in that point. I think one interesting way I'm sharing with the EdTech entrepreneurs is that just look at the EdTech successful companies today. Some of them raised a lot of funding, but they're really struggling in the market, right? Just look at them and figure out what they're doing wrong, either in their delivery or go-to-market or customer identification. Even that will give you clues to the next company you can build. For example, if you just look at, a lot of people are worried about some of the unicorns and saying that, are they really going to succeed, fail, and there's a whole thing about them. Don't worry, just look at the unicorn, figure out actually on the ground what they're doing, okay, and observe them closely as a user. You can get multiple clues on just replicating with the difference. That itself could build the next company. Because you're building on the learning and the mistakes of the previous company, right? That's how a lot of innovation also happens in the ground. You don't need to completely innovate something new, right? So that's another way to just look at the bigger companies there, which are, and figure out the core mistakes they're making, and then innovate using that.
Great. So let's get back to the question of scaling. How once the product is out there, etc., how do they scale up?
All right, let me, before we get into scaling, I want to get into this, are you ready for scaling? Okay, because that's a very important point. So sometimes, entrepreneurs and founders jump into scaling without being really ready for scaling. So I think it's very important for the entrepreneur before they get into scaling or rather start scaling up, because scaling, what happens in scaling is burning money. So you need to make a lot of investment, and once you make investments, obviously the investor, whoever is putting the money in, starts having expectations that it will have a return in a certain defined time frame. So let me step back a little bit and say, okay, first and foremost, decide, are you ready for scaling? So you need a proof of concept. Okay, oftentimes a proof of concept sometimes is you have an MVP of a product from a software perspective, and say, hey, I have this nice MVP and it looks good to go, and I'm ready, I'll get started. That's not enough. There's a lot more that is required to be ready. So they, for example, they have to make sure that the product addresses a specific need. There is a product market fit. Okay, here is this nice MVP. Here is this product, but what need has it? I mean, have you tried it out with a couple of pilots have been run? Have you done some pilots? Have you figured out that it actually solves that problem? And at least somebody is saying that I'm willing to pay for it, even though you may not have charged them during the pilot. So you have to do those pilots. You also have to have some idea about how you're going to sell. I mean, there's go-to-market strategy that we all talk about. So we have to have some idea, is it B2B, B2C, which way are we going to do it? And at least have a clear blueprint of a business plan over ready. And that's when we are now ready to scale. Okay, so I think there are a lot of prerequisites before we get into scaling, and once they have that, obviously it's easier to get funding. You can talk to the potential investors saying, not only do I have an MVP, but I have done some pilots, I have an idea how I will go to market, and then we are sort of ready to go from a thing. Now, once we get into this, then obviously there are a lot of things that you need to scale. I mean, first and foremost, you need an enthusiastic and hardworking team, all the skill sets, whether it's marketing, whether it is actual sales, branding, technology, customer service. We need a complete skill set up there. We need to have clearly documented procedures. How are we going to deliver to scale? Because you can't really deliver to scale without process and procedures. And then, of course, the funding at some point in time, one would need funding to get on with the scaling exercise. And then the soft skills. I mean, the founder must be willing to learn, be humble, and also sort of keep their head down. And finally, behind all this is a very strong burning desire and a passion to succeed. I mean, and a sense of urgency. Without that, they really can't do it. So it's not just a mechanical thing. They really have to have a real strong passion behind this thing.
Great. Sunil, what would you add? What does it take for an entrepreneur who's in this space now? Now they want to scale up. What do they do?
So let's take an assumption that they've got a product already in the market. They've got a couple of POCs running. look up reference customers. Let's assume they've got those 3 ticked off, right? And you have a working product, obviously, which is why it's working. Okay, so you've taken care of all of that. I think the challenge really for a market like India is that your access to customers is not very easy, especially if you're looking at a B2B scenario. Okay, education institution customers are expecting a physical touch point to actually close a deal or sign a contract, right? They're not still comfortable doing it virtually, which means that you have to have somebody on feet on street. Either you look at hiring 100 people running around, that's one option that you have, is expensive, or look at partnering with potential partners in the market. Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities have some really good partners that are hungry for business, unlike Tier 1 markets. Okay, so Tier 2 markets is where we should look at playing with partners, saying that can you enable frontline partners to carry your solution forward? So can you look at a multiplying effect in which you look at distribution or partners as potential frontline salespeople for you to enable that scale out for you? I think that's one piece to solve for. Second piece that we've seen a lot of success is around trying to get referenceability. If you have a good brand, typically in a B2B market, if you have a good brand that's using a solution, that becomes a great, powerful story across that market that you're addressing, whether it's the west of India, north of India. There are these strong logos that you need to acquire and figure out to play there. I think that's the second piece to look at. Can you figure out a good reference set of customers that can become your spokesperson to try and drive referenceable sales for you to scale? Okay. And the third piece is to try and make sure that you're vocally promoting yourself a little more aggressively. Okay, because I believe there are a lot of great solutions here, and the founders don't talk of it as much. We don't see them active on social. I think there's a need for amplifying that success, at least projecting the success more, to make sure you get more success coming your way. I think those are the 3 things that scale will really help.
Great, thanks. Rishi, what do you see as some drivers for
I
scale?
think I would focus on 2 things. One is, I think you need to have a very clear core identity of what you are standing for and what is it you are trying to do. I think that core identity really helps bring coherence in all that you are doing. So a lot of interesting books which have come out in recent years looking at the startup journey, which have really tried to figure out, how do you, what are some of the core elements which really have to be in place for the startup to scale effectively. So that's one I would certainly underline. The second thing I would underline is taking a good relook at your team, because I think even if you go back, say 20, 30 years, one of the elements of companies that have scaled is having people who understand scale. I think the people who are good at starting up the company are not necessarily the same folks who are good at scaling. You probably need people who have worked in a scaled up environment. Even in that environment, of course, not everyone is necessarily good at building scale, but if they have seen that scale, at least they have the right orientation. And then you need people who can actually build scale, because in many large companies, there are people who ride on the existing systems. Those are not the guys you want. You want the guys who can help you build the systems that will help you scale. So making that distinction and getting in those right people, I think, is pretty critical. But I would really focus on these 2. Make sure you have a strong core identity which you keep reinforcing. And second, make sure you have people in your team who understand scale and are capable of executing scale.
Great, thanks.
I'll just like to add a little further on the scaling up. So just adding on to the points that our colleagues have said here. See, this concept of, first of all, from scaling up, you have to have logos, you have to have brand identity. So if you're going to B2B, then having some great logos obviously helps. I mean, you have placed your product in some great well-known schools or colleges or universities. Now, that's one way to do it. But if you're going to do a B2C kind of an approach, then just adding further, yes, it's important to have a distribution network. Just trying to acquire one customer at a time using digital and or other means, it's very, very expensive. So you have to have a partner network to go. And also in terms of branding, especially when you're going to a B2C, there's a brand, the concept of a brand ambassador becomes very important. And this brand ambassador doesn't have to be, it does not have to be Dhoni or, for everybody. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big cricketer or a big movie star. Oftentimes, even people from education who have held eminent positions, like Professor Rishi, for example, or people who have been in education, maybe either they're still active, or sometimes if they're active, they may not be always authorized to speak, but even retired educationists. I mean, people who have been school principals or deans or, directors of well-known institutes and who have recently retired, they make great spokesperson, and it may not cost so much. But so if they have somebody, let us say a retired director from IIM Bangalore, or let us say somebody from a retired principal of a Bishop Cotton school, that would bring in a tremendous brand value without burning a hole in the budgets too much. But having that kind of brand ambassador is also a very great asset, especially when you're going to do B2C with a distribution network.
Great, thanks. So we got about, yeah, jump in.
What happens is that people who build education companies are very immersed in education, so they're close to being educators and
Yeah.
they have an academic bent for a lot of time, and they're not thinking marketing.
Right.
So the point that both Sunil and Professor Rishi made about the team, I think is very, very relevant. I think bringing in an orthogonally different thinker who is maybe from sort of the consumer space, somebody who's just sold software to many companies or whatever, B2B, would help these companies to scale. But this is a big, there's a big leap here, which the founders rarely make, because they're thinking that, hey, this is education and you're being core to
Right.
being true to the spirit of education. We are teachers, we're educators, you build a great product to teach math. Fine, you build a product, how will you sell it to many people, right? That needs maybe a guy from Levers or something like that, some guy who sold products,
Got
right?
it.
But that is, I think the point that Professor Rishi made is very, very true. You've got to get that team for scale, which is very
Yeah.
different than the team that you brought up.
Yeah.
Especially from marketing angle. Other scaling can still happen, the people in technology will scale, but marketing is a very difficult angle.
Good. Okay, good. So we finished the basic common questions for everyone. I want to ask some specific questions for each of you. Rishi, how is IIM Bangalore working with EdTech startups? Are they actually working on the curriculum end, or are they being used in classrooms, after class activities? NSRCL is also incubating EdTech entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of stuff happening at IIM Bangalore. So what's the connect between EdTech and IIM Bangalore? Any
So
thoughts?
in a way, we have our own EdTech startup. So I think we have tried to do it through the inside out kind of a model. So in 2014, when we decided to go into the MOOC space, we decided to create our own team on MOOCs. And that's grown to quite a big team now. We have about 35, 40 people just managing, creating content, editing, doing the marketing, whatever, the whole piece as far as the online education is concerned. So we have worked with the other companies largely to get ideas, maybe some small partnerships. But we also took a decision that we will largely go on our own, except for being on the edX platform. So we felt that our brand is very sacred to us, and we also felt that we have very strong capabilities in content. So we believe that if we could create good content and also link it up to our brand and a good platform, we would be able to have good impact. And I think it's happened in a way. We've had about 2 million learners signing up on the different MOOCs platforms in which we are present. Of course, completion rates are a different story, but that's an industry story, so that's not specific to us. We've had people from more than 150 countries sign up for our programs. 2 of our courses are among the 100 top courses on edX. So all of this suggests that at least in this limited space, we have actually done pretty well. I think the interesting thing we are doing now, which might be relevant to our discussion here, is we are now trying to see how can we solve the problems of specific sectors. We are primarily in management education. One way to go, of course, is to do very general management programs, which we have plenty of. The other thing to do is look at underserved segments of the market where there is an important need to create much more customized content for that particular segment. Let me give you an example. So about a year ago, we started a hospital management program. And the whole idea of this was, how do we enable people working in hospitals? It could be doctors, it could be nurses, it could be paramedics, it could be anyone there. How do we help them develop the management skills which will enable them to make a better contribution in the hospital? And of course, some of them could go on to become hospital administrators as well. So we looked at we have about 60 courses on edX, which cover different aspects of management. So our idea was to take these 60 courses and see how can we curate this into creating a good package for hospital management. But once we started doing that, we realized in some subjects, the existing content worked quite well. Accounting, for example, there's not much difference in accounting in a hospital and accounting, say, in a manufacturing company. But if I take something like operations management, hospital operations are very different. So we did that analysis, we realized which is the content we can use as is or with minor modification, which is the content we need to recreate, and we made a completely new set of courses for hospital management, and we launched this certificate program as I said last year. So this is our currently what we are trying to do, and I think there's a lot of learning for startups as well in this. I think there are, as I think Murli was mentioning earlier, there are a lot of those niches out there which people are just waiting for a good solution. The next market we are hoping to address is the MSME market. I mean, as you all know, MSMEs are the main generators of employment in India. They also have significant competitiveness challenges because of all the changes that are happening around. They can't afford the traditional management education that we offer. It's too expensive, it takes up too much time. So we are now planning to try the same approach we use with hospitals. Can we curate very carefully designed modules which will help MSMEs become more competitive? Essentially, the owners as well as the key people working with them could take those courses. So of course your question was more about startups, but I think we are trying to create that startup mentality within our institute itself, so that we try to address some of these needs which exist out there. And of course we do, as I said, partner with startups as and when the need arises, but a lot of this is actually being driven internally.
Yeah, no, many great tips for startups in what you said. To find that niche, hospital management, that's a great one, and for MSMEs, and also how to go from one to an adjacent market, how to tweak what you have and move to other. Great tips for founders. You're right in the middle of this space. So, what are some things you're doing with startups? What are? Yeah, please.
The work that I am did with edX, it's a reference for anyone to take. Actually, it's a phenomenal amount of work. Really, where I heard of this on LATAM. They talked about the project that was done here and the quality of content and the work. It's quite globally recognized. One really good implementation that is there. So that's phenomenal success.
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
Yeah.
So we lightly talk lightly about it. We don't realize how big it is unless people come in and tell us that we've used it in LATAM. I said, okay, so that's a story there. So that's a good one. From an AWS perspective, right, we've been focusing on startups in the education space for some time. We have a program called EdTech that primarily is looking at a virtual accelerator to try and help early stage startups get access to builder support, to build on the cloud, to look at potential ways to architect on the cloud for scale. And these are things that we're very good at, and we've done that globally. So we have a fairly large number of members in the country right now that are using EdTech as a potential starting step to build for education. And we have a phenomenal number of members there that are building there. What we're doing now is to try and make sure looking at upskilling as an area. That's an area that we're seeing a lot of edtechs moving towards, rather than looking at K-12 higher education, looking at upskilling as an area, because there is a need for a lot of upskill demand that's coming in right now. So we're seeing that as a focus. And a lot of small startups are looking at that area to try and move forward. See, what has changed between 2021 and 20 when the pandemic was there was virtual learning was de facto, right? That was the biggest thing possible. I think now it's stabilized to a level where looking at more things we can do there. For example, moving away from virtual learning, how do I make sure that we can have curriculum and content design depending on learning ability of the person receiving it? And those are conversations that are very interesting that's happening right now. So a lot of startups are building in those areas which are very new, potentially can scale, and looking at working with them in a proactive manner to try and build for them.
Great. In your case, tell us about your story and how we've grown, what's happening in this space, what can other entrepreneurs learn from your experience?
Sure. So at Etutorworld, which I founded along with my co-founders, so we took up this area called online tutoring for the K-12 segment and serving students in the United States. So, we actually had an example ahead of us. We had a company called Tutor Vista, and very much like what Murli said, we learned from their mistakes. We learned Tutor Vista was very well funded, and but they made some mistakes. So we learned from the mistakes, and we innovated and said, how is it that we can be better? So for example, I mean, sorry, not blaming anybody, Tutor Vista is no more, so I think we can talk about that. So one thing is, like many of the startups, they wanted to scale very rapidly. And so they went after customer acquisition at a very high cost. So that burnt up, that made their financials put under a lot of strain. And second thing is, in the process of scaling up, the quality often suffers. So they had to pay a price in terms of quality because when you're scaling up rapidly, the supply side doesn't often scale up so rapidly. So that was one issue, and the second issue was with the high acquisition cost, the financials came under a lot of stress. So then they unfortunately got into a negative spiral. So which is they obviously the initial investors were able to sell it based on the scale, and they all did well. But eventually the company did not do well. So we learned from that. So we built on that model and innovated. So first thing is say be careful about scaling up, do it gradually, and second thing is always ensure that quality does not suffer. So our story is, and lessons for other entrepreneurs are that first of all we do a proof of concept. Second thing is scale up, but start scaling up gradually, and ensure that you have good quality at all times. Because tutoring, the area that we do is very highly quality conscious. Consciousness is very important. And we are doing live tutoring, so you have to have high quality. Now, so our story is that we have built a great, organization. We built a great product. Now we have built some scale, but not enough scale, and that's when we are now stuck into this B2C issue that the cost of acquisition of customers is now outstripping the revenue. So in fact, what we figured out now is that we are well established in the market. We have reasonable revenues. We are even profitable, because we decided that we will be prudent. So we are profitable. We are running smoothly, but the growth is not happening as fast as we would like to have. The pandemic did give it a bit of a bump, but it is kind of flattened out again. So now we've realized a little bit that we have to build a partner network. Just trying to go up one customer at a time is very expensive. So now we are evolving our organization to still B2C. We are still going to the consumer, but building a partner network. And then in the US, so sitting here, building it in the US is a little more challenging, but we are doing that now.
Great. And in your case at Lodestar, what are some highlights from your journey so far? What's up ahead?
Yeah, so Lodestar is my current startup. I started this in 2014-15, so it's been 7-8 years journey now. So this is my third startup and second in the education space. I started this build Merittrack along with two other founders, Madan and Mohan. Merittrack was the skill assessment space, India's largest skill assessment company. So at Lodestar, so that was for graduates getting into the corporate world. So then we moved focus at Lodestar to the high school students trying to make a decision about their education and career. That's the space we're tracking. It's been a kind of a interesting journey for us at Lodestar. I think what we've really succeeded, we've worked with about 50,000 students now. We've actually counseled 50,000 students with deep one-on-one counseling, and we built an online platform to do this and stuff like that. But I think the real learning has been in actually creating the model of counseling. So before Lodestar started, there was no professional model. There were a lot of individual counselors, right, who had their own self-experience and knowledge that they were imparting to students, right? But there is no professional platform and a professional process. So we've succeeded in building that. So what we built really is a amazing platform which is data, algorithms and stuff like that, which enables any counselor with even limited knowledge of the entire big world of careers to effectively counsel and any student, because the platform does the heavy lifting. It does 70-80% of the work, and that is a big move forward, because that will then enabling scaling this service to large level. If we were to depend on individual counselors and their own inherent knowledge about careers and colleges and courses, this would never scale, right? So we built that, and we've done it's a blended model, technology plus the facilitator. So in fact, a lot of parents who use our service are very surprised. They ask us for the expertise level of the counselor. They say that my child is interested in life sciences career. So do you have a life sciences counselor? We said no. All our counselors can counsel across careers because the platform does the majority of the work. So I think that's one great thing, and we also succeeded in actually the signing of 50,000 customers at a good price point. There's another innovation in the market. That's the other thing that we've done. Earlier, prior to Lodestar, people were selling the service at like 500, 700 rupees, 800 rupees, 1,000 rupees a session. So our solution is up the pricing, which means we've been able to establish value in the market. And these are good things for the industry, I believe, because that's when the service gets taken seriously. That's right. But this is an ocean, Madan, and we just like the India
Great, great. So we talked about the business of education now. Let's talk about the inner journey of the founder. We've talked a little bit already about the inner qualities of a leader. There should be a leader in business as well as leader in education, etc. So what are the qualities of a leader in the EdTech space? What do you think is the current strength of the leaders that you're seeing? What are some things that are missing? How should these leaders build up strengths to expand the vision of education in a business sustainable manner? Rishi?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't have too much personal experience I can draw on. But just looking at the market and reflecting some of the comments that the others made here, I think there are a few things which seem to be quite critical. One is I think you need to put in a lot of effort into getting your product market fit right. And I think the reason why that becomes particularly important is if you don't do that, you will be forced to do a lot of mis-selling in order to boost your revenues and to enable your growth. And that comes with its own negative consequences. So I would strongly urge any leader of such an organization to really invest a lot of time and effort. I think Mukul gave us a good example of some of the dangers of scaling prematurely and so on. So I think you must have a lot of confidence in your core concept. You must be willing to be patient to validate it well before you actually get into scaling. You have to have a very strong customer and market orientation, which I think Murli underlined several times. I think that's a very important skill that the leader has to have. And I would imagine that some generic skills which a good entrepreneur requires are equally important here as well. For example, I think the willingness and ability to continuously experiment and to do a lot of tweaking to improve effectiveness and efficiency, that seems to be extremely critical. I mean, increasingly we are referring to the leaders as what we call orchestrators of experiments. Earlier, leaders used to come in with their intuition, with their hunch and so on. But in this digital connected world with all this data, I don't think that hunch stuff is really what works. What works much better is, can you really do those right experiments which will validate the idea you have, maybe if required even make you pivot, but your willingness to actually go out there, get the data and then use the data to come to a right decision. I think these are some of the things I would consider essential to a good leader in the EdTech space.
Fantastic. Sunil, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to add, I think I've had the pleasure of meeting a bunch of founders in the EdTech space over the last couple of years. I think one of the things that I keep seeing is the sense of experimentation, right? There's a keen intent to try and learn, try and fail fast. And you see most of the guys who've been successful, they know exactly where the ball's going to bounce next. Okay, and they're trying something there. And may work, may not work, but that constant urge to find the next place to go is always there. And you see them actually looking at, in parallel, as the main business takes off, in parallel trying to create these sample models and testing it out. Okay, and I'm seeing that across most of the founders. They have this constant urgency to find the next one that's there. And I think that urge to learn, experiment, fail, revisit it, try and do it again is a continuous process. And most of these founders have that. I was a founder that failed tremendously. So from my experience, just urgency and purpose alone does not work. You need to have a supporting team that can help you do that. You need to have a clear technology plan as to what it's going to look like over the next 5 years. I think that kind of visionary thinking, only a few people really have it. And I think with that experimentation is where you see a lot of people going forward.
Both of you mentioned failure. So I think I'm going to ask you that question. How does one, failure breaks many people. How do you bounce back from failure? How do you?
Yes, failure is an integral part of a founder's journey. So the thing is that it's very unlikely that you will get everything right the first time. It doesn't happen. I mean, the thing is that the very purpose of an entrepreneur is to do something new. And when you're going to do something new and you're experimenting with something, it's very rare that you would get it right the first time. So thing is, we have to be prepared for failures. We know that it's just part of a learning process, and and fail fast, like colleagues said, fail fast and move on. So that's what I would suggest, that is fail fast, move on, and conserve your resources. Be right up front, be aware that you might fail in something. Conserve your resources and be ready for the next iteration and the third iteration and the fourth iteration. And eventually, it's not that you will just get there by accident, but everything is very well carefully thought through. And eventually, if you keep doing the right thing long enough, then hopefully one will succeed.
I think to show to the customer and the market that you're here to stay for long. Whether it is an individual customer or it's an institutional customer, I see from the customer's perspective, they would not value you if they feel that you'll be here today and you'll be gone tomorrow. Because still in the Indian parent's mind and the student's mind and the institution, the principal, college, and the mind is that, okay, this guy's come and he's telling me a story, this is a fancy new idea, but will he be there in the third academic year? Okay, and that's a big challenge for a lot of startups, because a lot of startups are not conveying that I will be there till the fifth academic year, right? And in education, especially if you implement the product in school, it takes at least 18 to 24 months to get it really working. And if you're not going to be there till that time, so how will you convey to the institution that you'll be there? By your own commitment to that, by personal commitment to that space and all that. So you will have to bring that sense, which I see a lot of younger startups don't do. For example, they'll meet a principal, the principal says, no, I don't think it'll work here, they'll stop connecting, they'll say they rejected us, so they'll go to another school. In this education segment, you've got to be there. I've seen the benefits of that both at Merittrack and at Lodestar also. We've been in touch with principals of schools for a long time. In the third, fourth year of our existence, they've come back to us. It took them that time to believe that this is a solution I should actually take to my students and implement in my school. Because many of the institution leaders have a much more longer term perspective than the startup. They are really looking at the betterment of the student over a much longer and because they have that sensitivity and that care and concern for the student, they will not just use a product just like that. And among parents also, while they've experimented with a lot of online products, they also see that this company exists. Are they doing the same thing over a longer period of time, even in B2C? So if you don't bring that as a leader, in education it's very difficult to succeed. In fintech and other spaces, you can be there, make a quick buck, get out, okay, but in education it will be very, very tough to do this. So as a leader, as a team, conveying that I'm here for 10 years, I'm not going to go anywhere, and that so those are the kind of leaders I think will succeed better in education.
That's a great insight, yeah. Another issue which has come up quite often is the broader ecosystem. So it's not just you and your customer as a founder, but there's a broader ecosystem in education. So what are your thoughts on ecosystem engagement as a founder? How should founders map, engage, orchestrate the whole ecosystem and not just the direct customer?
Mukul also mentioned earlier, I think building education leaders to endorse your product or journey and contribute as a sounding board in your company. I think that is one big way to build. And then there are institutions which could endorse you and stuff like that. So that could be one way to bring in the ecosystem. Finally, the education ecosystem looks up to the teacher and the education leaders. Definitely, whether it's a B2C or B2B, they will look up to them, and engaging effectively with them and bringing them on as endorsers, I think is a great. So there are platforms, there are events, there are activities, there are forums that do that. So you could align yourself to them, and then that would be one.
Yeah, speaking of events, I was at that science expo over the weekend. Amazing. They had all these K-12 students showing Arduino kits and solar cells and all that kind of stuff. So yes, there's a very big ecosystem. Events is a big.
The existing ecosystems.
Yeah, correct.
For example, CBSE has this Sahodaya school network. A lot of people don't engage with Sahodaya very much. It's a network of principals of CBSE schools.
Oh.
So every city will have one or two Sahodaya networks, and there'll be a chairperson for that, one of the school principals. A lot of EdTech startups don't go up to them and talk to them and stuff like that. They're not easy to break in because they're themselves running schools and they're busy with that. But if you build long term, see, all this will yield benefit in the third year, the long term thing. The first year they will all just talk to you nicely and send you back. But next year they will maybe introduce you to two schools next year. So being a Sahodaya partner, helping them in their events, be a great way to engage the ecosystem.
Yeah.
A lot of people just sideline them and go to school directly. But the Sahodaya, the board, the management thing there, they are very influential people. That's one example of it.
So are there any good EdTech startups which have created something on their own in the ecosystem, like a competition, challenge, award, and how can that help them, grow the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, multiple people have done. For example, this company called YourStory Learning, which has created a young leaders massive competition. They've supported it, they've not created it, but it's the platform they've created it. And so other startups can link with that.
Okay. Question to you, how to engage
Yeah.
in the existing ecosystem, create new parts of the ecosystem.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, just first of all, getting onto the thing. That one more example. I mean, there's in the K-12 space, there is this Olympiad. There's a startup which has started thing. This called the Olympiad, and which has become very popular in this K-12 space. So they run this as a competition, and the recognition that it provides, it's pretty well regarded. So that is something that can be run. Now, stepping back a little bit. I mean, one is education ecosystem, but one is the ecosystem of entrepreneurs themselves across different fields. So it's very important for them to engage with the ecosystem, leverage the knowledge, the connections, which include mentors, advisors, incubators, organizations like TiE, which help entrepreneurs. So, it's very important for the founders to help, take their help in their business ideation, product ideation, etc. To bounce their ideas, because that is what TiE and many of us do, helping other entrepreneurs. So it's very important for the new entrepreneurs to deal with them, and it will help them doing pilots, arranging some pilots, etc., and molding their product as per the real customer needs. So that becomes very important. And later on, when we talked about scaling up, another aspect of scaling up, one is the marketing, the technology, and all that. The other is the organization itself. So for scaling up the organization from a structural perspective, you have accountants, you have lawyers, you have investors, etc. It's also important to engage with them, and organizations like TiE bring them all together. So when a company is scaling up, it's very important to start looking at those aspects as well, in addition to the technology and marketing and things like that.
Great, thanks. And in your case, you're very active globally in this whole EdTech space. What are some events you have in the ecosystem where you encourage founders to come and get involved
One
with
is
you?
what we do by ourselves. I want to talk about the stuff the government's doing, right? For example, the Smart India Hackathon. Smart India Hackathon, I believe, is something that's been going on for the last 5 years or 4 years now. And 500,000 students participating in one of the largest hackathons in the world, right?
Wow.
It's interesting to see how it's moved. I don't know how it's going to continue for the next couple of years, but last year was equally large participation across all colleges in the country, having some representation across hardware and software, and cloud being part of it. So I think we saw a lot of success there. That's one ecosystem that's very, very strong, and I think the AICTE as an organization did a lot of work over the last couple of years to drive that community of buildings, right? Trying to make people try innovation on campuses, right? That's been an area that we think we're seeing a lot of progress there. The other innovations that we're looking at working with is the Atal Innovation Mission, the AIM innovation centers, the tinkering labs, for example, in K-12. Those are really, really great projects. I talk quite a lot about it. It's just that if you think of it as a business revenue for you, it may not be very, very great, but then the reach that is there, the enthusiasm of children to work on new technologies is phenomenal. One of the experiments we did in 2021 was to build a campaign for AIML for that grade, 8th to 10th standard kids across CBSE schools, and we got 6,000 schools participating with projects, and we were very surprised that it happened because the response was tremendous there, and the kids building these applications around soil monitoring, weather monitoring, etc., using AI models was very, very interesting. It was in partner with the ministry. So I think those are the government initiatives that are very, very strong and worth dipping in. The associations that exist right now across K-12, there are some strong associations that's worth partnering with. Progressive Schools Association is one that does a lot of work around trying to move the needle around adoption of technology and stuff like that in that group. That's worth going in. Like I said earlier, right? K-12 is a tough market here. It's very difficult to crack that market. And whereas you look at other geographies like the US, for example, K-12 is actually easier. Okay, then it's just here that K-12 is really tough. I think because of the way it's structured, right? Because we have 2.5 million schools running, and it's quite a large ecosystem to crack into. So that's big struggle there. So I think the ecosystems that are there right now, whether you look at TiE, obviously is one that's been driving a lot of interesting conversations there. We're also doing a lot of work with bodies like the Government of India, Atal Innovation Mission, for example, to try and drive this forward. NASSCOM has a lot of work that's happening around this area to try and drive that. So we partner with them to see how we can leverage them and support EdTech to scale.
Rishi, what I am doing in this ecosystem for
Yeah, so
education?
just
Tell us
to
about NSR cell and all.
Yeah,
all
to
this.
answer your original question though, I think the most interesting ecosystem today which startups really need to engage with is the regulatory ecosystem. because with the new national education policy kind of under implementation, there are a whole lot of changes that are happening, and all those changes directly or indirectly are also opportunities for startups. So whether you look at the whole new national credit framework, which is redefining the way credits will be achieved, and this is a very simple thing which has huge impact for startups, because they're increasingly, the government is also realizing that credits don't come just from the time you sit in the classroom. Credits can come from projects, credits can come from online classes, credits can come from a whole lot of other activities which were not traditionally seen as part of the curricular activities. So I think this is all opening up new opportunities for startups to work with education institutions. So I would sort of really suggest, if you are serious in this space, you want to be, for example, regularly, if not, I mean, you can't meet them all the time, but at least keeping track of all the announcements that are coming out, looking at some of the new developments, and this is happening across the spectrum, by the way. Even the school education piece is getting modified, even the way we structure schooling, the traditional primary, middle, high school, even that is undergoing a change. So I would strongly advocate, getting engaged with that ecosystem as an important source of ideas and opportunities. The second one is, I would echo what Sunil was saying, which is essentially look at what's happening in NITI Aayog and Atal Innovation Mission and all those related organizations, because they're again really looking at being catalysts for a lot of change. There's this whole new digital university which has been announced in last year's budget and is likely to take off this year. So I mean, I think the government is also very conscious about the need to use technology to drive a lot of initiatives, and NITI Aayog is one of the places where a lot of those ideas get generated. So interacting with the right folks there would also be a good both source of ideas as well as a source of business opportunities for many startups.
And how about TiE Bangalore? Can you tell us about NSR Cell and how that connects with the EdTech ecosystem?
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, NSRCEL is doing a lot of interesting things. 2 or 3 things which I think are relevant to our discussion today. One is, we have really, and partly thanks to the pandemic, scaled up our scale of activities. So I think last year we had touch points with about 6,000 to 7,000 entrepreneurs, which is like huge number compared to what we were doing pre-pandemic. One of the reasons this happened is we realized our traditional model of just working with a limited number of startups face to face is not the right model, and a lot of it happened, I think, slightly by chance, but we are now capitalizing on that. Let me give you an example. So the National Commission for Women came up with this idea that they want to be involved in supporting and helping women entrepreneurs grow. So they reached out to us and said, can you run a really good program for women entrepreneurs? Now, IMB has been in the women entrepreneurship space for 20 years. So we have quite good experience in working with women entrepreneurs. So we used the existing content and made some additional content and offered an online program for women entrepreneurs across the country. 6,000 women signed up for the program. About 1,500 completed. And we also realized that for a program like this, we can't do face-to-face one-on-one mentorship. So we started creating new models of group mentorship, online virtual groups, things like that. We've done a lot of innovation in that as well, so that we can work with a much larger number of entrepreneurs. So the good news is, I think, as a result of some of these things that have happened, we are now really trying to connect with a much larger number of entrepreneurs than before. And one of our guiding principles is that if an entrepreneur connects with us, we want that entrepreneur to go away after the interaction feeling that he or she learned something from the interaction. We can't mentor everybody, we can't work with everybody, but whatever interaction they have should be beneficial to them. Coming to EdTech specifically, I think at this point of time, we don't have a specific EdTech program. We have programs in some other verticals. We have programs in FinTech, we have one in mobility, we have one in sustainability space. To the best of my knowledge, there's no EdTech vertical today, but we are always open to opportunities. So if we have a good sponsor, some good partners, we'd be happy to look at the EdTech vertical as well.
Yeah, the sponsors are right here. So, the question of pandemic came up quite often. So my next question to all of you is, are we really in the post-pandemic kind of phase? Is the pandemic effect tapering off now? What are some new realities in this new normal, new abnormal, whatever it is? Rishi? And what are the implications of post-pandemic era for startups? We're seeing in the news, there's a lot of question about layoffs. Every day the front page of the papers is startups are laying off, big tech companies are laying off, etc. So what's happening in this space?
Yeah, so I think in general, we are used to all these cycles. I think we've seen it before in the dot-com boom, which is of course 20 years ago, but I think it's not surprising that we are seeing something a little similar now. So there tends to be some amount of irrational exuberance when certain things happen. In a way, the pandemic pushed lots of things online and gave a fillip to many kinds of startups which were largely driven by online business. And we saw, of course, significant bump in people's revenue and all that. And it's not surprising that a lot of money went chasing that as well. I think things are now becoming a little more realistic, which is probably good for the long run. I think in many industries we are seeing, and EdTech is a good example, where blending is the way to go. I mean, it was always obvious it's not going to be one extreme or the other. There are going to be elements of technology which are going to help you scale. There are also going to be things where you need to be more personalized. Sometimes technology will allow you to personalize, sometimes you'll have to find other ways. So I think to me at least, I think the pandemic has taught us a few things. It's taught us the importance of technology. It's taught us the new possibilities have come to light of how we can reach out to learners. So, but at the same time, we've also realized that we have to be practical, we have to be focused, we have to solve actual problems of learners, we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of core learning objectives. I think all those things have also got in the line. So overall, I think, while certainly it was a tough period for all of us, but net, I think it's, we're onto a good path now. And I'm also happy in a way that some of those valuations and all have come down, because we were having a lot of challenge. For example, in our MOOCs team, we are a educational institution, non-profit. Retailing talent in our MOOCs team was actually a big challenge when these EdTech guys were all taking off and offering huge sums of money. Now all those expectations have come back to reasonable levels. So we can run our organization in some amount of peace, I think now, at least for a little while.
Peace for a little while. What about you guys? You were the ones maybe doing the poaching,
Not us.
Not
I think the market's changed. Last year was that year of resetting, really. 2022 is when we saw most of these spikes that was in 21, 20 settle down. In the middle of last year is when we saw all of them stabilize. I think one of the biggest benefits, it's a horrible, difficult time, I agree, but one of the biggest benefits that we're seeing is that people accepted technology, at least in the segment of education, right? Where there's resistance to technology in a big way. They don't want to adopt it. I think that got changed to a large extent in those 2 years, where we saw customers actually experimenting with at least having some sense of automation. Okay, and it's an interesting point, right? Look at most mature geographies, a student information system is a de facto in the institution campus. People have to have it, which is not the case in India. And I think that was a big change that happened in the last 2 years. We saw many customers actually implementing systems. Now, will they continue using the systems over the next couple of years to be seen? But then we've seen that stabilize to a large extent. So at least they know the value of automation, value of virtual learning, value of creating supplemental content. Okay, the entire flipped classroom model was experimented to a large extent over the last 2 years. We talked about 4 years before that. We saw that being happening. So we saw a lot of changes coming in, which is all positive, right? The flip side is that the number of students that went online was very, very high. That therefore created a lot of people going in that line, right? We also saw an interesting trend, which is virtual examination, exam automation always existed. Meritrack was there maybe 10 years back, 8 years back, okay? We saw that area take off because they had to conduct exams now, and we saw institutions actually open to the idea of automating examinations, which is normally a very difficult part of any of the operations there. So we saw that take off in a big way. So what we're seeing over the last year is that while institution adoption has gone up, student consumption of online content has become de facto. They're comfortable doing it. Institutions are okay providing virtual learning classes, etc. All the changes are great. We're seeing that stabilizing now. Number of people that are going in and acquiring customers, that is stabilizing to a large extent. Most of the EdTechs now realize that the market's not going to be the 2021 markets anymore. So they're resetting their priorities very differently. We have a lot of them looking at figuring out how to go to tier 2 and tier 3 cities as a potential go-to-market. How to try and make sure content is localized in multiple languages. We can address a new set of audiences compared to English-speaking audience alone that is currently being addressed. We're seeing all those trends changing. It is primarily driven by the fact that they've realized that the market is not going to go the same way as the last 3 years. It's going to stabilize factor. I think a change is permanent now.
What about for both of you, post-pandemic?
Right. So, the pandemic was obviously a huge impact on education, and like in all other sectors. So, education, so perforce everything had to move online. So, and the thing is that schools, as colleges, universities, other skilling education or programs, everything went online. I mean, there was no other choice. So, one thing is, a lot of things. First thing is people recognize that a lot of things can be done online because they had not even thought about it earlier. They know a lot of people were stuck saying, no, this has to happen in a classroom. Like Professor Rishi said, everybody was having face-to-face training programs. So, one thing is people recognize that yes, a lot can be done online, and so as the pandemic has ended or rather subsided to, so to speak, things have come back. People also recognize that, look, everything cannot be done online. There's also an important role for the teacher, for the instructor, that human touch is also important. So, now it has come back a little bit in the sense it's more blended. The blended model is here to stay, where a lot of things will be delivered online, but they'll be augmented and supplemented by the human touch, by having face-to-face interaction. And that also brings in, one is of course the interaction with the teacher, and second is the peer learning, which is the social aspect of it. I mean, when students sit together at any level, so that social aspect, the peer learning aspect, that's also very critical. So, even though in online they are interacting, but that interaction is not as productive as it is when they are physically next to each other. So, my understanding is that the pandemic has been a great learning experience for everybody, and it has now sort of got into a new, more stabilized model of blended learning, that certain things can be done online, will continue to be done online. At the same time, peer interaction, teacher interaction, face-to-face interaction also has an important role to play.
I think I'll endorse that with that user behavior change that Sunil and Mukul talked about is very, very dramatic and clear. And this is maybe the UPI moment for education kind of a thing. To give an example, Lodestar, career counseling is one-to-one, and one-to-one, everybody prefers physical meeting. We moved 100 within a month and a half of pandemic, we moved 100% online. And now in 2022, customers don't want to come back to offline. Our offline numbers are less than 70%, right? The remaining people are naturally preferring. They're saying, why will I'm sitting in Whitefield and wherever your office in Jericho, why will I even travel for this? I'm comfortable. I've been doing Zoom meetings. I'll do the counseling also online, and we're all comfortable. In fact, very interestingly, in many, I think the father is in one location, maybe in an off-site location for work. The son is at home or daughter is at home, and they have gone on a Zoom call with the counselor who's in Bangalore, and we're doing counseling, and everybody is very comfortable, right? So this user behavior shift is dramatic, honestly, very, very dramatic. On the exuberance point, I think we are like overplaying it a little bit. I saw some data to say that multiple markets, but see the numbers that people were doing in 2019, I think we're way above that already. I think there was a hockey stick growth in 2020 and 21 because of everything going online and whatever had to happen. And the hockey stick growth has come down, but the numbers in 22 and now 23 are definitely much higher than. So if you, the trajectory is still upward, right? It has not fallen on the users, consumers, that metric. Even if you look at layoffs, I think the recent statistic that said that the numbers that the large tech companies have added, numbers that laid off is less than 10% of that number, the additions number. But it just made a lot of news. That's all. Actually, the numbers they've added in the last 2 years is much higher than the numbers they're let off now. I think companies are just using this thing to clean up some files and stuff like that. A lot of companies. So I think overall, if you do the 3-year average, all the metrics are upward. I don't think it's down. So you had a real consumer shift, and you had companies growing. That's the two.
Got it. One more important issue is governance. I mean, without naming any names, there have been many startups in the news for inflating numbers, putting pressure on parents, and things of that sort. So, what are some ways for startups to make sure that they've got the governance house in order? How can things like boards of directors, advisors, all of that come in? What's the governance mandate now for startups in general, EdTech in particular?
I think governance is a very tricky issue, Madan. I think unfortunately it's not a problem of EdTech alone. EdTech might be in the news because it's something that affects lots of us, but unfortunately it's not restricted to EdTech. I think governance, unfortunately we don't seem to have very simple answers. That's my take. We've been talking about better corporate governance for at least the last 20-25 years. We've had all these reforms in terms of independent directors, board composition, all the Companies Act amendments, better norms for accounting, particularly putting down things like the accountants could even lose their license if they have found they didn't do a good job. But unfortunately, none of these things have really seemed to have completely worked. So I think finally, at the end of the day, I think what's really required is, we also need good watchdogs. We need people who will be, I think, for example, the analyst community, for example, has to play a much more substantial role. Hopefully, they don't get into, cahoots with the promoters themselves. I think that's a dangerous situation. But if the analysts can remain independent and from time to time, raise the red flag, and of course, everyone else has to do their job as well. As you said, the independent directors and everyone else. But I must confess, at this point of time, I'm somewhat befuddled on how are we going to really solve this particular challenge. And I think these challenges get accentuated when there's big money chasing companies. I mean, to put it in short.
Yeah.
So you're under pressure, or at least you feel the need to justify the valuations and investments and everything else that's happened, and you find a lot of entrepreneurs who are unfortunately not willing to take the straight path but are trying to find shortcuts. So though I'm a professor and all the rest, I don't think I have a simple answer for you.
Okay. Comments, tips on governance? In the two
No,
of your
I
cases?
can give a talk.
First of all, how does your board help you?
Yeah, so it definitely does. So let me put it this. First of all, what happens is that founders, especially entrepreneurs, most of them don't know about corporate governance, to be honest. I did not know about corporate governance. The first few years I was running the company, we started, we had a company secretary and we had auditors, which we are required to do in a private limited company, and they would just do their job, and some board meetings would happen, and the accounts would get audited, and sort of things would just happen, and without me or the other directors knowing much in detail about what's going on. But then sometimes things change. Sometimes you have internal challenges, sometimes you have external challenges, or sometimes and especially if you start scaling up. When things are small, frankly, it doesn't really matter. But as you start scaling up, how do you recognize revenue? How is revenue and P&L different from cash flow? Because then it starts becoming significant. What is cash flow? What is P&L? They are not the same. Okay, so one has to start learning about these things. What is the related party? So many of these concepts start coming up as we grow. So some of these things which are, when you are small, they don't matter that much. But as you start scaling up, all these concepts become very, very important, critical, and so it becomes important for the founders to understand what the auditors are talking about, what your company secretary is talking about, and what your bankers are talking about, and pay heed to them. Not just that, okay, somehow manage it and don't just brush it under the carpet, because as things grow, it becomes more and more difficult. Because I can see even in my small organization, revenue recognition. The auditor said, look, the way you're doing it, when should the revenue be recognized? At the time when you are delivering a service, or at the time when you are getting the sale? Okay, so when does the cash flow happen? Is the customer paying you upfront, or it is spread over a period of time? So many of these things are becoming very critical in terms of governance, that to understand these concepts as we grow, of course, for an entrepreneur, marketing and technology and customer service are the most paramount things. But as we grow, we have to move beyond this, and the founders have to spend time and have to engage with professionals, both hire professions as well as engage with professionals, to make sure that we are done in an ethical and in a correct manner. And
I think I just add one point to what he said. He talked a lot about what I would broadly put under the umbrella of formalization.
Yeah.
I think typically when a company is very small, it's very informal. as you said, you
Right.
might not actually hold a board meeting
Yeah,
sometime, but you will
just do the
write the minutes, things like that. But I think the first step undoubtedly is formalization to make sure the meeting actually happens.
Correct.
That the company secretary or whoever it is and the auditor and everybody is actually present, that you're listening to them. I think those are all excellent first steps to follow. I think one of the things we have seen particularly in scaling is that the probably makes sense for you to quite early on adopt the practice of larger companies.
Yeah.
Maybe even before the law requires you to.
Right.
If you are really anticipating rapid scaling, you start bringing in those formal processes and structures a little earlier so that you get into that habit and practice of doing that.
Yeah.
That will also probably save you some
Yeah.
trouble later going down the road.
And the crux in education, specifically in a corporate governance, is in the revenue recognition space, which Mukul very alluded to. The issue in education is that a lot of services, the service gets executed over a period of time, and this the entrepreneur is not able to grasp and put that. For example, you sold a service today, like a education service for a class 10, for example, right? You sell today, you recognize your revenue, but the service gets delivered over 1 year. And what if the student drops out? What happens, right? In the middle, after the first 15 days, if it drops out. So this is where I think a lot of the issues that you see in the media also that are coming. Also, people are bundling packages, they're bundling 2-year packages,
Right.
Either at the individual level, even at the school level, in the institution level. So I've sold you a career guidance package for 2 years. I've sold it for 2 years, you collected part of the revenue, or at least you recognize the revenue, there's the receivables, and you're stuck there, right? But many of these are not good practices, honestly. But there is a genuine confusion also. It's not only malified intent, it's genuine confusion. Because like in many of the products, you sell the product today, you recognize the revenue, right? But there's a huge service component in education, which is where the confusion. So I think there's a good point that you raised, Madan. I think entrepreneurs should be educated that you'll be very careful, work with the financial experts to figure out revenue recognition and be conservative. That's one thing I definitely say. But I want to take a little different view on this. So now you had some of these big startups having issues with their financial numbers and stuff like that, right? So one of the problems with education earlier has been that it's a very traditional market with a very long-term focus, and customers have not flocked to it, and hence a lot of money has not flocked to it earlier. But I think the last 5 years have changed that in education, right? It's dramatically brought in people who are building unicorns. I think last year itself, 2 or 3 unicorns got created in education, and the physics wala is like even a short time is a unicorn, right? So that exuberance, honestly, in the world of entrepreneurship and business, if you look at any market, it expands by leaps and bounds because of that exuberance. So I think that is one dramatic thing that's happened. Yeah, if you build in exuberance, there's going to be a lot of wrong things that will happen, and that's happened in all markets, whether you look at any market, finance or real estate, etc. So we're going through that learning curve as an industry. I'm sure that it'll get settled on. But what that exuberance builds in is built in a huge amount of investor interest. It's built in it's brought in a huge amount of aggressive entrepreneurs who are trying to solve the problems. It's brought in a huge set of customers into the market, right? Who sort of suddenly start interacting with these products and all that. Yeah, some of them will have bad opinions about the product, but that will settle down, right? So that's why I said earlier that the clue for the new entrepreneur is figure out what the big one, what mistakes the big ones are doing. If you felt he's missold a product, no problem, but he's already brought in 100,000 customers into the market, right? Now the 100,000 if your thesis is at 70,000, they've missold the product. You create a better product. The customer is already in the market, who was never in the market earlier. The customer would go to a school and a college, would never buy an EdTech product. Right? So the exuberance is honestly, I believe, as a thing. Yeah, from a media perspective, optics doesn't look nice, but I think it's moved the industry forward significantly. That will be my view.
Next question for you guys is on investor management, how to manage relations with investors. Very often founders who start scaling up, they have to learn how to work with investors who may have a slightly different agenda. So how does a founder negotiate this whole discussion with an investor in terms of the strategy of the company, tactics and so on?
I think rule number one in all my startups some of my board members have looked at my update and said, "Murli, you're too honest. Why are you even saying these things? It's not happened." I'm saying, no, your partners in my journey. You trusted me with your money. I need to just tell you all this. That, I think, builds a long-term bond. And many investors who come in, either angel or institution, are experienced people. Some of them have built companies, some of them have been board members in other companies. So they do recognize challenges and stuff like that. So in some of my earlier startups also, when I've had very bad down periods, I think these investors will just come forward because of the transparency and transparency in numbers, data, information, and just even sentiment, right? Saying that, for example, when I see some of the startups that I'm working with, in quarter one they would have said this is the initiative, and quarter two that initiative would not have happened. They would have quickly deleted that initiative itself. Okay. So, and for investors, sometimes at least angel level, it's not difficult to keep track. It's difficult to keep track, right? But actually, it's important that quarter two to say that I told you 3 initiatives, 2 of them just bombed. Okay, and typically what they will do in the quarter two is they'll highlight the one that's working, right? So just say it bombed. But that creates a lot of transparency. I think that's one guide. I would say. Rest then you learn as you manage investors and stuff like that.
See, the other thing with, of course, transparency is most important. Second thing here is you have to be realistic in accepting milestones, because the job of investors is to push the entrepreneur that you're going to do what? I mean, you're going to do 1 million of this, or 10 million of this, or 100 million, and you say it will take 2 years, and they say, no, I want it done in 3 quarters or 2 quarters. The challenge here is that, look, if the entrepreneur cannot visualize, even mentally visualize how it's going to be done, don't take the milestone, because otherwise, thing is, you're going to fail. If you are sitting here on the table as an investor, you're telling me that you need to have 1 million students. I think it will take 3 years, but you're telling me that you have to have it in 1 year, and here's the money. If I can't even visualize a way of doing it, then don't take the milestone. Because if otherwise you're just setting up yourself for failure, you're breaking the trust. So at least be clear what you are accepting as a milestone, and be at least able to visualize some way of getting it. You can't just take things blindly. So that is very important, to be transparent in terms of how things are going on, and also to be transparent in terms of accepting what what the investor is going to expect from you over the period of time.
But just add on, a lot of times the money has come in because the founder himself has told them the 10 million story.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right, told them 10 million is possible.
Right.
But you would have told them 3 years. It's possible, do it now.
So
How do you backpedal then in those cases?
No, I think.
Do you say I overestimated?
In my journey in 2 decades, I've never backpedaled. And I've told see, it's my job as an entrepreneur to build a big dream and to chase the big dream. The big dream will happen or may not happen, but you don't judge me by my efforts. But if I am not the dreamer and the builder, then you as investor definitely not the dreamer and the builder.
Right.
Right. So I have to take the can for the dream. I've had challenges sometimes. They say, no, yeah, you are already scaled up company. Give me quarter-on-quarter numbers. I said, no, I will not give you quarter-on-quarter 30% growth. Because I'm here to do 100% growth. I have to drive the vision like that. That's how the organization also will respond. Right. So I've always believed that, and if you aim 100%, you get 50%. So that's okay. That's a fantastic growth, right? Yeah. But yeah, this is an honest conversation. But do the conversation with the thing that I'm aiming big. Let's
Sunil, any observations you've seen?
No, I think what Murli is saying is right. I think one is the clarity of vision and staying with that clarity of vision, right? I think many of the founders are very clear where they're going to be 4 years down the line, and the ability to work backwards from there to say how you're going to build that pathway to that goal that you have. That clarity is something that people are looking for, and if you have that story well stitched, I think it's a no-brainer really. Transparency is a given. If you don't have that, you'll get into trouble. It's not going to go too far. And also the point around failures, right? I think culturally we don't look at failures. We've built very differently. We like to look at success and keep moving forward. I think failure is where we learn a lot more. And I see that across the organization. If something does not work, we don't talk about it. We pointedly move to the only one that works. And I think that's where the challenge of us learning more is limited, because success doesn't really give you too much of learning. It's the failures that you really pick up on. Ask me, I failed as a startup, so I have a lot of learning.
we'll come to that. Yeah. Rishi, any observations on
Yeah, I have
invest?
two observations here. One is I think it's a little bit about managing expectations. Obviously, as the entrepreneur, you are driven by this big dream, and that's how you get others to join you, the team, the investors, everyone else. But I think you have to manage the expectations in a reasonable way so that you have some reasonable chance of meeting it, and at the same time, feeling excited about the journey on which you are. That's the first thing. Second thing, one thing I remember which I heard many years ago, which I think is still valid even today. We often think that it's the investor who's choosing the company, but it's the company who also has to choose the investor. So I think you have to be careful about who is this investor you choose. Make sure that you have an investor who is invested in you, whose ideas are aligned with what you are trying to do, whose sort of outlook is also somewhat reasonable. And it's not that difficult to find out how investors behave. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, some of it validated, some of it not, but you should go and make all those inquiries. It's not about the investor doing due diligence in you should do due diligence on the investor as well. Because I think that's where half the trouble starts. If you have an investor on you who has a history of unreasonable expectations, you're maybe setting yourself up for a lot of trouble there as well.
Great, thank you.
Independent advisors and board members will be very important. So, so we built a panel at Merithack also, we built a panel of independent advisors, right? Where it was nothing much to do with the business, but there were eminent people in various walks of life and stuff like that. And they will know many of these investors
Right,
and other people. So from past, so they will be able to tell you how this investor will behave in a diversity, a downturn situation or whatever kind of a thing, which from public data you may be able to glean or not. So I think.
I mean, it's even, just to give you a simple example, many years ago my father ran his own company and I used to work with him. So one of the things we used to practice the same thing even in choosing your banker. I mean, we are not a very big company, but even for a small company, taking a bank like SBI, it might move slowly and all that, but they're not worried. Something goes wrong, it's some 10th decimal point in their balance sheet. Yeah? It really doesn't worry them. But if you work with a much smaller bank, that guy will get worried even if your some small losses are around the corner. So I mean, things like that make a big difference in my view.
Great.
For younger entrepreneur, the older mentor will be able to decipher this. Younger entrepreneurs can't see this. They have not gone through that life curve and turning to figure out how investors will be.
Yeah.
So I've always relied on advisors.
Okay.
I'll just add one more point for investors. I think this is important for the young entrepreneurs is also the concept of what should be the involvement in the company in terms of day-to-day decision making. Sometimes this micromanagement is also another problem that comes in. So one is the big headline numbers. Okay, we're going to grow 100% or a million of this or 10 million of that. The second thing is to support that is the actual business plan. Because, okay, they've given you so many $100,000 or so many crores in funding, but how is it going to be used? I mean, you're going to spend this money in marketing or technology or advertising or things like that. So what that does is that if you have a clear business plan, and so what you have discussed and agreed with the investor is not just a top line, but a fairly detailed business plan, and then work with the investor to make sure that don't keep troubling me on a day-to-day basis. I will take my own decisions within this business plan and make decisions. Otherwise, oftentimes, this micromanagement or decision making is also something which can really hurt. Okay, I want you to do this, but you need to check with me for every major approval. So that's also another very important, and it's also, as Rishi said, Professor Rishi said, it's a cultural fit. I mean, that how are you going to work with the investor? Do they have that faith and trust in you that they will leave you alone and let you get on with your work once you have a top line number and a business plan? Okay, you may or may not achieve it, but at least the investor knows this is how you're going to spend their money right up front. That's there.
One thing we did in our early days when we were younger entrepreneurs and we had very senior and big investors in our board was to get in an independent director who was of equal stature to the investor.
Right.
So what that did was that in the board, and the independent director is obviously somebody you know and you look up to him as a mentor and he likes you and all that. So then he would balance out the board push from the investors, because whenever a push came, he would say, no, when I built my companies, I did this.
Right.
Then the investor is okay. He's also, otherwise, if the investor is in the only room with you, then and you're a young entrepreneur, they'll really
So by statue you mean another builder of a company, somebody just,
somebody who
got
already
it.
built,
Yes.
exited,
Yeah,
multiple times kind of a thing, that kind of a person if you're on the board. So we found that counterbalance very, very good. So the investors, the Series A guys that we got on board in Meritrack, they would, but they would make a point, but they would not push it because there's an independent director who also built companies. And that person would be balanced, like you see both sides of
Got
the
it,
coin.
got it. Okay. We're almost out of time. My last question for each one of you is, what is it that is so exciting about the education space for you? Each of you have been in education for so many years. What is it about education that turns you on so much, and how can some of this excitement that you have rub off onto entrepreneurs? How should entrepreneurs also see education as being the best thing in the world, maybe?
Well, I think the education story is a very fundamental story, right? If you just look at the stage at which our country is today, I mean, we have really made significant progress in the 75 years since independence, but there's just so much more to do. And if you really figure out what is it that's going to create that foundation that enables the country to achieve all the dreams that we have, there's no, I mean, education is a very obvious core part of that. Without having a well-educated population and citizens, you're just not going to be able to achieve the dreams which the country has. Just that one fact alone to me seems to be such an exciting thing. And the fact of the matter is that while in pockets we have done well in education, there's still huge challenges in mass education which we simply haven't addressed well at all. And those are visible to us almost every day, even in our day-to-day interactions with people across society. So I think, to me, education at least is one area in which I think you don't really need to think about it too much. It's very obviously before us as a huge challenge, and if we can address this challenge well, we'll have a much better and a stronger platform to build the country in the future.
Brilliant. Sunil?
Yeah, so just adding to that, I think see education, the way I'm looking at it, right? I think that's one segment that we are seeing a significant opportunity for India to take leadership globally. Okay, and the reason being that I don't think we have another pool of students like we have in India, where you can experiment with a whole bunch of new solutions and technologies at scale. And I think no other country would have that today. And I think that's a USP that we have. And building for the world from India is a reality with regard to the EdTech ecosystem. I think something that more and more EdTechs are realizing is that they're able to monetize better when they go outside of India with the solution that is successfully sold out in India. And we're seeing that happening in new markets, right? And I think it's just starting there. It's literally day one with regard to technology and education in India. The government's push around new education policy, for example, is going to dramatically change education over the next 5-10 years. It's going to be a significant change. And with automation, with the ease of access, with the population that is there, we're in a unique position to actually see India be someday the gold standard globally with education technology.
Wow.
So several things. I mean, first of all, education is something which touches each of us personally. So there's a very strong personal connect. When you get into education, everybody, all of us, we can talk about our own experiences. This is what I experienced. This is what I should do for myself, my children, and the society. One is the personal connect. The second thing is it's a form of social entrepreneurship because it's really a social good. I mean, so what happens is that, okay, personally for myself, I look, of course, we are here in business to make money. Yes, eventually one would like to make money, but in the process, while to the time that we are not making the money, we are still doing a very strong social good, helping children get educated wherever they are in the world. It's definitely something which is good. Also increasing the livelihood. I mean, teachers are not the highest paid professionals in the country. So I employ a lot of teachers, giving them a means of livelihood or additional income for them, educating the students. I think there's a lot of social good in the education segment. And that in sometimes augments or supplements the financial aspect of any entrepreneurship exercise.
I completely endorse what all the panelists shared. Personally, for me, I think my personal highs come when I see impact of the work that we do, and I think that's true for all EdTech. For example, like at Meritrack, we used to do assessments where people would get jobs in big companies. So in the walk-in fair, I used to see kids. When they got the offer letter at the end of the day, from either an HP or a congressman, the kind of joy, because for many of them, it's like a life-changing moment, okay, for them and the parents, right? they could achieve that goal, right, for their parent and their family. So that is a, so at the whole day when the news came and she's become a chartered accountant, the whole day, all the counselors were just talking about that. Now that's a huge high for the company and for the people, right? That work is meaningful.
I think what was also amazing is, just look around, particularly among the middle class and even people who are little less economically advantaged than that, there's tremendous faith in the ability of education to change lives.
Yes.
You look at the amount of money some families spend on educating their kids. They're spending
Exactly.
a very significant part of their budget on just education.
That's right.
And they're all looking at that as really a means of, changing the lives of their kids, of course, but, generally changing their family's outlook going forward. So there's a lot of faith people have in education, and they're actually looking for, the right kind of educational support and solution which will help them meet their dreams.
So in that context, if there's a solution, but you made that connect, that is a big aha moment for you as an entrepreneur, and this desire and this aspiration is there.
Great. On that very inspiring note, we come to an end to our first charter member roundtable at TiE Bangalore on the importance of education for India and the opportunity for EdTech startups. Thank you all very much, and become a member of TiE Bangalore and keep following our charter member roundtable series. But first, a big round of applause for all our outstanding experts here for sharing their hard-earned experience and inspiring messages. Thanks Rishi, thanks Sunil, thanks Parul, and thanks Mukul, and thanks Murlidhar. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madan. Thank you.
Thanks. Good. Cut.
Hi, this is Mukul Agrawal. I am the co-founder and CEO of Etutorworld. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey with TiE. So when I decided to become an entrepreneur a few years ago, I heard about TiE from a couple of my friends, and since I had already been a CEO in a large IT company, when I talked to TiE people, they had said, okay, why don't you come in as a charter member? We'll be happy to help in your entrepreneurial journey, and I'm sure we'd take your help for other entrepreneurs as well. So I became a TiE charter member almost 7-8 years ago, and I have learned a lot in terms of my entrepreneurial journey, and also as a mentor for many of the budding entrepreneurs over here. And I'm really happy to see the different events being organized. The roundtable organized here is a great example of what new innovative initiatives being taken by TiE. And today, this was a great experience where we had different participants from different walks of life. We had in this EdTech roundtable, we had people here who were academics. We had people here who were from the industry, from AWS, and we also had entrepreneurs like myself and one other entrepreneur. And with the when Madan did a great job, working with all of us, and together I think we were able to have a wonderful conversation, which I believe should be of great value to coming entrepreneurs in the EdTech sector. Thank you.
I think the association with TiE and AWS has been a couple of years now, where we're looking at working and building the EdTech ecosystem. I think one of the takeaways from today's conversation that I feel very strongly around is this discussion that Murli spoke about around the need for exuberance. To me, interesting area, because if exuberance doesn't exist, then you don't have the rest of the ecosystem moving forward. So I think the exuberance of founders is an important element that was an interesting point from today's discussion. And the system along as we build EdTech go-to-market category.
I've been an entrepreneur in the education segment for the last 2 decades. I'm a TiE charter member for the last about a decade now. I've been active in various forums of TiE. This initiative of the Roundtable series that TiE has begun is an amazing initiative because it brings together multiple diverse experts deeply discussing one topic. Today I had a great experience talking about education with 3 other stalwarts in education. Fantastic experience across a wide ranging set of topics. moderated and navigated beautifully by Madan. So thoroughly enjoyed, learned a lot from them myself, and I'm sure that the discussion will be very valuable for other startup founders in EdTech as well as in other areas. Fantastic time today. Thank you.
Of our charter member roundtable series at TiE Bangalore on the EdTech sector. Thank you all for watching, and biggest thanks of all goes to our speakers over here, Rishi, Mukul, Murlidhar and Sunil. Thank you all very much. Keep watching our roundtable series and follow the coverage on YourStory. Thank you.